Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people are taking interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Hello and welcome to the Parliamentary Review podcast, the podcast that puts leadership in the crosshairs. I'm Jonathan White, and in each episode I'm joined by directors, CEOs, CFOs, government ministers, chairmen, presidents, maybe one day even the Duchess of Sussex. I promise you, Your Highness, we are a carbon-neutral podcast, despite some of the hot air. The aim is to discover who these people are. We learn about the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We learn about everything from the future of British coal plants to what's going on in the world of modern dance, and of course the innovation and success that makes it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current political and economic state of the country. Later on in this episode, you'll have the chance to hear our exclusive interview with Lord Blunkett, former Home Secretary, former Education Secretary, and of course the current co-chairman of the Parliamentary Review. But for now, we're joined by Neil McLauchlan, the CEO of Dunstaffnage Marina. Neil and the Marina's chairman, Ewan Bell, had a vision to change the marine geography of the west coast of Scotland, and that has today evolved into a thoroughly modern and successful marina. The marina, after being established in 1997, has grown today to offer 250 fully serviced berths for yachts, super yachts and motor vessels in a stunning location that has created its own community around it. I look forward to learning more about it. Neil, welcome.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I know, I think it's been a good 6 months, obviously, since Dunstaffnage has been in the review. I think the listeners would love to know what's been happening with the marina since then.
Well, Jonathan, we've had a very busy season so far. I mean, I'm really heartened by the visitors we've had from all over the world. We have, as you know, 250 berths at Dunstaffnage, and we have, in the last 2 or 3 years, put in super yacht berths for yachts that are in excess of 25 metres. This year we've had an 84 metre. We had a 52 metre last week, which is here until the end of August. So the market in that, unfortunately, my research this time has proved correct, and it's a market that is quite exciting. And really, for us, we're probably one of the very first specialist marinas that accommodate super yachts of that sort of size and in any numbers.
I suppose, build it and they shall come, or at least sail.
Well, it's very much that way, but being probably one of the most northerly marinas, it's a bit of a risk to just say build it and let's hope it fills up. I did a fair bit of research in the early days before embarking on this with my business partner, but I think it's been the right call, and I think it is, in any business or any venture, it's important to do your homework and research things carefully. But for us, being that bit further north, there was an extra risk factor that we had to consider. But the market was that people wanted to bring their super yacht to Scotland. They wanted to sail the Western Isles and do the Mecca out to St Kilda and places like that. And I suppose in many ways these big yachts are frustrated perhaps further south by volumes of boats that get in their way. And indeed in the Mediterranean now the cost related for these super yachts is staggering. So we've tried to accommodate them in the factor that they can use us for a few weeks and use it as a springboard to head out to the Western Isles and beyond.
Perfect. I know in the last few years, obviously, there's been quite a lot of enhancement work at the marina. I goodness knows how much concrete you'd have gotten through at this point, but
fair amount. I haven't calculated this up, but I have a figure in my head which was quite a lot of money that we spent, but it's got to be done, and unfortunately when you're doing heavy civil engineering works, there is no budget that is cheap. It's always a very limited number of people that specialize in that type of product, and it's then going out to the market and being careful about ordering the right product and all the accessories that you need to make the whole thing work, like extra electricity, higher output, huge quantities of water that can be delivered, and fuel indeed as well.
But now, contrary, I think, to what a lot of people, I think, assume, but the marina has actually only been there since 1997. It was yourself, your chairman, Ewan Bell, who established it.
Yes.
What was the initial inspiration behind that?
Well, I think it was Ewan that started it, and to be fair to him, he's something of a man of vision. And I went there in 2004. I've known Ewan for over 40 years, and it was getting to that sort of crossroads stage where he had some direction but needed some of the business experience that I had brought, because I was one of the founding directors of Nokia back in the late 70s. So I suppose loosely could say I had some ideas about doing things right. And I came in, and together we put in ISO 9000 quality management system, which I had done in previous businesses, which I felt was hugely important for our customers, that they could identify with a company that meant to deliver quality. It's easy to say it, but you have to be able to demonstrate it. And it was that sort of thing that was important, because a lot of these yachts that come are people in the retirement who have invested a lot of money in a £400,000 or £500,000 yacht. You've got to be able to demonstrate that you know how to look after it. And so we have a staff of about 25. We have engineering workshops. We have boat builders, repairs engineers. We have a small chandelier. We have a small hotel and restaurant and bistro, which is rented out. So it's about giving that customer or berth holder a nice experience when they come to Dunstaffnage.
You've alluded to it there, Eddie, but more than making sure someone has a place to berth there, it's the fact that you've really, from scratch, created an entirely new community on the western coast.
Yes, that's right. We are in a very remote part of Scotland, and the community is totally self-reliant. Oban is a diverse community where they try many things to make it all work. But the biggest difficulty for any small business in the west coast, or indeed northern Scotland, is the winter, because the tourists go home and don't come back until the summer or the spring the next year. It's trying every year to extend that season with offers and trying to make it work for our staff, because what we don't do is we don't take on staff and then lay them off in the winter, because that's hugely unfair to them. It doesn't allow them to build their families and settle in the community. So we are an all the year round business, which is something that I have been very keen to put in place for our staff.
And maybe on that point, looking not just at specifically at Dunstaffnage, but also perhaps more broadly the sector, especially in on the west coast of Scotland. What do you think? What can you identify right now as being the main challenges that it's facing, especially now in the medium term?
Well, for us, Jonathan, it's always been about getting the staff that have experience in that industry, because it's while we are one of I suppose 120 in the world, we're a 5 Gold Anchor Award, which represents standards again for the customer that they can expect. It's very difficult sometimes to get young trainee staff that are prepared to come in and commit to the industry in a remoter part of the country, and particularly in the winter months. So most of our team now have been with us quite a few years and have built up their own skill set, and it's about having, I suppose, pride in what they do. It makes a huge difference. They're extremely enthusiastic and are part of a team. I mean, while I'm the managing director, I am no better than any of the other member of staff there. We are all work together as a team. I've got 2 young sons involved in the business. My youngest son is now the manager, and he's got his advanced marina management. Hamish, who who is the middle son, he is our harbour master, and they've been there 6.5, 7 years.
Superb.
And very enthusiastic to be in the industry and working there.
And I think you can be very proud of. Now, I know...
Don't tell them I'm proud of them.
Well,
they'll be asking me for a pay rise.
I'm sure we can edit that bit out. I know that, as you mentioned in the original article, there was a bit of a problem with Argyll and Bute Council, who had, I think we'd like to know sort of what level of consultation, if any, was there with yourselves regarding their decision?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, councils are across the board have the standards, obviously, but for small businesses, it's very difficult sometimes to deal with personalities, and we obviously had put a lot of research and marketing into making the marina what it is today, but suddenly within a year of our super yacht berths opening, something like 3.5 years ago, we discovered that Oban, the council themselves, Argyll and Bute Council, had decided to put in a fairly large marina in town, right in the middle of town, only 2 miles from us.
And we should explain to listeners that that's only about 3 or 4 miles away.
It's less than that. By boat, it's 2 miles. There is another small marina on the island of Kerala within half a mile of that. And probably within 25 miles, there is something like 2,500 to 3,000 berths available throughout the summer months for sailors. So it's a very small market in a small area, and we're all chasing that one customer. So I was quite disappointed when I discovered that Argyll and Bute had been able to get a £3.8 million grant funded by the Scottish Government, funded by European money, funded by Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and had very much gone on the back of our business plan, and they have opened it, and it has affected business. What it has done is it's taken some of our customers, and obviously quite a few of the customers from the smaller marina on the island of Kerala, and I think they've had to retrench their business and redesign the business plans, as everyone has had to do in the community. And I was quite distressed about it, because we obviously are employing people all the year round. Oban Marina and in the middle of town, the transit marina as they call it, only employs 2 people, and it's only for the summer months. So it closes in October, and thereby hangs the tale that you can't provide a facility like that and then not really employ people. It's a huge waste of money. And while I can understand that the community generally and the hotels in the middle of town have benefited to an extent from it, I think one could say back to those people, would you like Argyll and Bute Council to build a super hotel in the middle of town on all grant aided? How would it affect your small business, the bed and breakfasts, the guest house and the hotels? And the answer is I don't think they'd be particularly happy.
And I think it's something that Lord Blunkett, our chairman, talks about in his podcast interview, in fact, but it's far too easy sometimes in this country for there to be a disconnect between, especially at a local level, between local businessmen and women and local policymakers.
Yes.
And it's something we really need to get better at. Now, you've mentioned again before, I think already here, that a few years ago you did leave British waters and have a quick trip down to the Monaco Boat Show.
Yes.
No doubt a very enjoyable boat show to go to. But was there anything of interest there in terms of things we can learn from, or indeed either whether it being good or the mistakes that they've made in the market in the Mediterranean?
I think the market, in fairness, Jonathan, the Mediterranean is hugely different, and particularly Monaco. Everything there is super expensive, and the boats and yachts that were there were, shall I say, not within the average pocket of our average sailor in the UK. We came back from it impressed with some of the marketing that they did, and we made contact with some of the super yacht group people and encouraged them to come to Scotland, which was really the primary reason for our visit, was to go around and knock on doors and say, look, we have a super yacht facility in the north of Scotland, and quite a few of them have actually come up, particularly the sailing fraternity. The bigger motorboat that's 40-50 metres, although we've had quite a few of them, the majority are the big sailing yachts. And I've always made it the analogy like the man that has his Ferrari, does he enjoy driving it in the M25? And the answer is no. You want to get into an open area with a lovely big boat that you can enjoy and go on a broad reach for 4 or 5 hours, not constantly be tacking and moving around, which is very much the problem in the Mediterranean for big super yachts, the sailing yacht type particularly. So we didn't, I wouldn't say learn very much from them, but I think the main thing is that we developed contacts and business.
You beat the drum, and you've got to go to Monaco. Even better. Now, in terms of, perhaps putting you on the spot here a little bit, but if you were, for example, Secretary of State for the day, and you got to sit in his desk for 5 hours after lunch, magic wand and all that, what is it that you'd do? What is it that central government could do, perhaps, that would give a boost to the sector?
I think they need to make grants available that are, shall I say, within the grasp of businesses. There are far too many. I discovered with Argyll and Bute the business plan that they made up to achieve the 3.8 million. I said if I had done that as a private individual, I would have had some people knocking on my doors afterwards because it was so imaginative.
Right.
We have to come at a business plan with reality, and you have to develop the figures, perhaps with an accountant or someone that has got some experience of doing cash flow, particularly because most of the ideas that businesses have are in the first 6 months or a year. The difficult bit after that is the following year and the years after that, where you must maintain that cash flow and the volume of business. And I think local government could certainly support better the individuals with financial support, not just for opening the business, but for cash flowing over the following 2 years or 3 years to make it work. Because that's when most of them, if they're not going to work, will fall down.
Absolutely. Now, it would probably be remiss of us if given we're talking during quite fairly peculiar political times. I think, given now we had a referendum almost over 3 years ago, is it something that's affected the marine industry? I know that the BMF came out at the time with some very pessimistic analysis. Is it something that you found that's come true?
I think it has, sadly. To be honest, I don't understand the analogy of wanting to remain in Europe and wanting to come out of a union. There seems to be a contradiction in terms there. I know that there has been a lot said about the Barnett formula and complaining about the levels of money that is injected into Scotland. Well, if Scotland becomes independent, there will be no Barnett formula. And I think at this particular point in not just the UK's politics, I think the world's politics, you can look around and see things changing dramatically and actually quite frighteningly quickly. I think the reality is that we need to be united, not disunited. And I think it has unfortunately done some damage to business, and I think it's certainly done a lot of damage to the property market, and it's done a lot of damage to the top end of the property market by the levels of land tax that has been added in as an extra layer. That concerns me for the future, and I think to start thought again about independence in Scotland will damage the country further. And I don't believe that the majority of Scots have an appetite for it. I think I have sympathy and understanding from all the parties in Scotland, and I enjoy some of the debates on television with the Scottish Nationalist Party. There are a lot of very clever people there, but I think some of this is becoming a passion with them, and I think they need to consider what the economics of the country are about, not just the individual's personal views.
I suppose the fear is that, especially when it comes to some of the nationalists in Scotland, it is far more an ideological game for them than it is perhaps what would be best for the economy and for the people that actually live in Scotland.
Well, that's right. But, we go back a long time, 200-300 years, and there was always this dissent with people across the border. But these are our kinspeople, and today we are a multicultural nation, and we need to forget any differences we had. We've come through 2 world wars together, and I think we need to unite at this very, very difficult time. And I strongly believe there is more economic problems round the corner, not just because of Brexit, which is obviously looming, but from across the world, in Europe and from America.
Well, I think you're spot on. You could have a man in Northumberland and a man in Berwickshire, and I don't think there's going to be much difference between them. You've been in business now, you mentioned, quite a while, and you've had a lot of success. What have been your guiding principles in shaping that?
I think working hard, that's the secret. And the harder you work, the easier it gets. And just being focused. And I think the thing for me is actually believing in yourself and believing in the people that you employ. That's what makes it all work.
I think it was key what you said earlier. I think about providing not just security to the people you employ, but making sure it's something they can be in turn proud of.
Yes.
And to nearly wrap things up, what would you say to young people at the moment? Not 20, but 15, 16, still in school, who are perhaps looking at a job supporting or in the marine industry at the moment?
I'd say to them, you've got a very unique opportunity, because we are, I think, at the crossroads of a huge leisure industry that is going to explode in the UK. We have actually, the truth be known, more boats in UK leisure than in France, all of the sort of French countries and the Spanish countries. So I think we need to put in place a lot of opportunities for young people with training schemes. We have at the moment 2 young apprentices with us, but it's mostly supported by ourselves. There is no opportunity being put through a council or local government where the young people can come into our marine industry. And that's sad, and I think they will go into other industries and never come back to the chance that they maybe wanted when they left school. And I don't believe that necessarily everyone should aspire to going to university. If they get the chance, good and well, but if they feel they don't have that academic ability, there's lots of other opportunities out there, and very exciting chances, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's hard work, and it takes a long time. So I would applaud them if they want to come into the marine industry, and I think what they should do is probably, if they are keen, is go to the local marina and just say, is there a Saturday job here? And quite often there is. It might be cutting grass the first week, it might be moving dustbins the next week, but week 3 and 4, if they're still there, they'll get to help with boats, and they'll maybe help with the engines, or they'll help with sails, and it will give them an opportunity, and it will give the employer a very good chance of assessing whether they are properly committed to doing this.
Well, after this, I hope perhaps you can expect on Monday quite a queue of young people.
Well, we're very welcome to hear from them, yes.
Actually, Neil, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to speak to you, Jonathan.
All right, goodbye.
Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed our chat with Neil, and especially learning more about the challenges facing the sector and how the whole team at Dunstaffnage Marina are continuing to raise standards. Is anybody else tempted to get on a boat and sail off to the sunset now? Well, as long as you go via Dunstaffnage Marina, I suppose. If you haven't heard it before, coming up now is our conversation with the Parliamentary Review's co-chairman, David Blunkett. Lord Blunkett served as the Home Secretary and Education Secretary in Tony Blair's cabinet before receiving a peerage in 2015. Outside of politics, he's the Vice President of the Royal National Institute for Blind People and the National Alzheimer's Society, and when he has the time, he can be found cheering on his team, Sheffield Wednesday. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking to David. Here it is now. We're now joined by Lord Blunkett. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Now, it would probably be remiss of me if I didn't start, given the recent events in Parliament. I didn't ask you, given your 32 years in that place, about your thoughts regarding the unprecedented situation I think the public are looking at the minute.
Well, I think I see it very much like Joe Public. I see it as though I'm looking at something that is made up, that is scripted, that is like almost a sci-fi film where anything can happen and then anything does happen. And I'm very sad about that because I think that it's damaged our parliamentary democracy. I think that it's brought politics into disrepute, and I think it's created anger on all sides, whether people were strongly in favour of remaining or whether they were, as we call them, Brexiteers.
Absolutely. And given that situation, whether it's going to be a general election, many people are beginning to worry about how apathy taking effect.
Well, I'm worried about two things. Apathy in the respect of turnout and whether people vote, and anger and, if you like, the friction developed into a failure to be able to have a democratic dialogue, so that the respect that we have for each other, that the way in which we debate issues is often now broken down, and there's abuse in the street, not just of people because they're considered to be different or foreign, but because people recognise they have a different point of view. Now, that is new. I've been around in formal politics now for, goodness, almost all my adult life, because I was elected to a local authority in my city of Sheffield when I was 22. And I've never seen that. I've seen people get very annoyed, and that's fine, and people should get angry, but I've never experienced them display it in such personal venom before. And we need to calm that, because our democracy depends on people being able to have genuine disagreements and differences and to work them through the political process. Otherwise, we fall, as history teaches us, into the hands of extremists.
Absolutely. And given that you've just said what you just said, a lot of people are talking now about whether the party structure, which does exist at the minute, it can survive. We've seen both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party showing signs of buckling.
I think the political system the party system will survive. It may have a very rocky time in the near future, but I think it'll right itself. But it will only do that if political parties themselves sort out what's going on internally. I think both major parties have been, to use an old phrase, infiltrated. I came across a prominent minister just outside the cabinet whose current chair of their Conservative Association was the UKIP candidate against him back in 2015. We know about the challenges within the Labour Party and the way in which people who were thrown out of the party have either been able to or are seeking to rejoin. And so we've got this two-ender, if you like, the bread in the two sides of the sandwich coming together, and the middle is being squeezed. Now, there's academic work to say that actually the electorate aren't all that keen on centre parties, particularly at the moment. And I think we need to be wary of believing that the creation of some sort of centrist party in Britain would solve the problem. It would temporarily, but it wouldn't resolve the differences that people have and how we work them through.
A lot of people have been suggesting recently that the only way out of this situation is with a second referendum. And I write in saying that you have quite reluctantly come to that position yourself.
It took me a very long time to come to the conclusion that we would need an affirmative vote. I resisted it because I come from and represented an area deeply disaffected, feeling the effects of deindustrialization and then the austerity measures on the back of the global meltdown, and felt in my bones, which is why I wasn't one of those who thought we were easily going to win the referendum for Remain in 2016, that you need to deal with the underlying problems and causes of that disaffection. And the simple slogan, "They didn't hear you the first time, tell them again," could be very effective, a kind of Trumpian slogan that could be adopted by those who are very, very vehement Brexiteers. However, I think given the state that we're in, I came to the conclusion a few weeks ago, and I wrote in the Daily Telegraph, that I think the only way to deal with this is to get an agreement for this interim period, because that's what it is, a transition from where we are to where we might be, and then put that to the British people. And if the British people don't like that negotiated agreement, either Theresa May's original or something that emerges from the discussions and the debate and the toing and froing between the two major parties, put that to the electorate and give them a chance 3 years on from 2016 to make a new choice as to whether that's what they want to go for, that's the direction they want to take, or whether they'd like to take a step back and remain in the European Union.
And do you think that the people of Sheffield that did vote leave, many of whom voting for the first time in decades or the first time ever, do you think that they would feel maybe slightly frustrated at the call for a second vote?
Yes, I think they would. And I think we just have to be really honest about that. There would be a great deal of frustration, bordering on anger, people saying, we gave you the message, why didn't you just do it? And we have to be straight with them. The reason it's been complex, the reason it's taken this time, the reason that we're in the undoubted mess we're in, is because it wasn't simple. You didn't, as some people thought, sign a bit of paper and walk away. This is a complex, interconnected, economically, socially, in terms of our trade and our relationships, not just within the European Union, but with the European Union's agreements across the world. This is a complex issue. And to pretend otherwise is not to give people what they want. It's to patronize them and say, yes, we don't think you were wrong. We don't think that you got it wrong when you thought it was a simple way out. I think you just have to be straight with them, and they'll be angry. I mean, people are angry with me when I walk around in my old constituency and say, what are you up to? And I say, I'm up to trying to speak the truth. I'm up to trying to say it as it is, as I always have done.
Absolutely. Now, given all of that, one would expect the governing party to perhaps be somewhere between 20 points and to 30 points behind the opinion polls, but they are not. And there has been an awful lot of criticism of the leadership of the opposition regarding that. Would you have any advice for the leadership of your party?
Well, I think belatedly, from the beginning of April, the two parties realised that they were going to sink separately if they didn't actually try and make an effort and at least display some endeavour to work together. I think had there been two different leaders post-2016 referendum, this would have happened a great deal earlier. It hasn't, but it can now. And it is remarkable that in the circumstances that the government have found themselves, not just in not being able to get the kind of deal that some people wanted, not even being able to hold all their party together, but actually being totally riven publicly with cabinet responsibility having broken down, to find themselves only marginally behind, or even on opinion polls through March, marginally in front of the Labour Party, is astonishing. And once this period is over, I think Labour will need to take a very long, hard look at why the British people have not turned, as they often do, to what is called Her Majesty's opposition. There are very complex reasons for that, including the fact that the leadership of the party have only realised, I think, very, very recently, that you have to reach out to people whose views you don't agree with, and you have to win them over to something more than the issues and the policies and the ideology you thought of in the first place.
And on that point, you'll be aware, certainly, that the Parliamentary Review itself has been dedicated to showcasing leadership in all its forms across the country. Now, speaking to many of our contributors, they have made clear that they do feel that leadership has been lacking, both from the government and opposition, as you've said. In your many years in politics, is there a time in certainly recent history where there has been perhaps a leadership vacuum like we're seeing today?
I think we find in Britain an interesting paradox. People want strong leaders, but they want leaders that listen and are responsive. And the two don't always go together. I've lived through the period of both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, two leaders who knew what they wanted to do and were prepared to put it on the line. I've lived through Ted Heath and John Major, who were less clear. Ted Heath on Europe, yes, but not on much else. John Major really trying to mop up after the controversial and divisive Thatcher era, where they showed a different style of leadership. Now, they were portrayed as being weak. I don't think that's always the case. I think that you can have leaders who are very clear what they want to do, but to turn on its head the Marxist slogan, speak softly and walk with a big stick, they can actually do the job clearly and decisively. Clem Attlee was such a person, and in many ways so is Harold Macmillan. And those are the kind of leaders where you don't get bombast, you don't get, I know best and I'm going to push this through, but you actually get someone who can genuinely create a coalition of the willing, but has a clear idea about their values. And I hope we'll return to that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the strengths of the review has always been its sense of bipartisanship.
Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people take an interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it, and therefore to get the message that they've got to reflect outwards. We need both. We need the input into the system. We need voices. We need ideas. We need experiences through Parliamentary Review inwards. But we also need to ensure that the way in which our politics works is reflected outwards, so that people firstly understand how the system works. Secondly, the complexity and difficulty of it. And thirdly, the way in which they need to tell us, I mean, I'm in the upper house now, but to tell us as parliamentarians what they think and where we're going wrong, and for us to listen.
Absolutely. And on that point, you've been in public service for most of your life, Lord Blunkett, ever since Sheffield City Council. I mean, in that time, what are the key lessons you think you've learned in the best way for policymakers and those at the coalface to communicate and work together?
I've learned that actually there is enormous wisdom out there, and if you're prepared to engage and to listen, then your views might actually change. Mine have on a number of issues, particularly social issues, what small L liberal issues over the years, going in the opposite direction, it has to be said, to most people as they age. And you need to ensure that you've reached out to sufficient people to create that coalition that allows you to make progress, and that you won't create everything you want and change everything you want for the better overnight. It will never happen. There's no days where everything's done and we can all wash our hands of it and that's fine. We build building blocks. We stand, if you like, historically on the shoulders of those who came before us. And if we get that message, we won't be too frustrated when everything doesn't happen immediately, but we'll be determined to make progress, and we'll punish politically, democratically, those who don't.
Absolutely. And perhaps finally, with that concluding point, it's fair to say, as you've already mentioned, a lot of the population are frustrated, no matter how they vote in the referendum or their general political opinions. But perhaps, for those people, is there something you'd point to be optimistic, looking towards the future about?
I think I'm very clear. We're a great nation. We can't just do things on our own. We have to recognize that we live in an incredibly rapidly growing global environment, and the power sources and the power politically has changed over the last 20, 30 years. But we are creative, we are innovative, and we will pull through. And we'll do it because we won't have anyone else to blame anymore if we come out of the European Union. And we'll need to literally pull our socks up and do it ourselves. In the end, my message is clear. Nothing is ever as good as it seems at the time, and nothing is ever as bad. And we've come through difficult times in the past, and we'll come through again.
Lord Blunkett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
As always, it's been a pleasure interviewing and learning from our guests, and I hope you've all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm off the feathers to raise a glass to raising standards. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit our website at www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.